Hi, I hope everyone is doing well today. I wanted to elaborate today on the corruption and the reason for all of the things that are happening in South Africa right now, including the civil unrest, the violent protest, the destruction of everything, digging up of roads, and inserting metal poles into the soil to take out people's tires so that they can drag them out of their cars and attack them. And it's happening all over, and it's very disturbing. But what I mainly want to speak on today was to elaborate on the level of corruption so that Americans mainly can understand a little more about the dynamics of why these people are suffering the way they are. They're run by thugs, people who murder anyone who speaks out against them, who have hired hitmen, who steal every dime that they can get their hands on. None of the money, taxpayer money, aid money, goes to help the people. It goes to line the pockets of these politicians. So, I took this information from a couple of different articles and a couple of different sources. The New York Times has gotten so fed up with the ANC government and the corruption that they have begun writing the most scathing articles on them. And with the knowledge that I have in reading these articles, they have a lot of information. They've done their homework. And I never thought I would quote the New York Times because they're very liberal. So for them to be reporting honestly on what these people are doing, these top government officials, that's pretty huge. I mean, because they're usually just so far left that Americans don't really pay attention to anything they say, not American patriots. So they say the corruption in South Africa is so bad it's like a noxious fog that settled on a once peaceful, prosperous nation. Murder for hire of wayward members of the ANC, multiple acts of sabotage in many major cities. Everyone seems to carry a gun or has bodyguards, even low-level provincial state leaders. The ANC no longer stands for African National Congress, but for accumulation, nepotism, and cronyism. Corruption is one of the most used words by South Africans. The corruption is so pervasive, especially in the ANC, the political party that's been controlled by communists from its earliest days and has governed South Africa since the end of the white minority government in 1994. The ANC is infamous for sabotage in its earlier years, and now there are many factions within. It's returned to sabotage plus assassinations of longtime comrades. It's now a fractured party with episodes of shootout like the old Wild West. It seems every member in the national government and in the provinces has his hand out or worse, even putting out contracts on fellow members with whom they serve. But the corruption is not only in the ANC, it's also in every facet of the nation. The schools, local governments, utilities, the mines, the police, the unions, South African Airlines, the rail service, and the banks. Plus, the political corruption in the ANC bleeds into all areas of national and local governments. Everyone seems to demand a bribe to do anything. I remember driving down the street one day and I was on the phone with someone from South Africa, and I was talking about the fact that I had gotten a ticket, and it shocked them because they said, oh, here we could just give them a little bit of money and it would go away. Doesn't work like that here, unfortunately. So the corruption's not only the ANC, as I said, but it is every facet of the nation. I mean, you can't tell where it begins and where it ends. The corruption is so dissolute, it's nauseated the famed New York Times to the point of publishing another scathing article almost a year ago headlined, "They Eat Money." This is another article I have that I'm not going over today that they published, but this is a really good one, and I will speak on it later. How Mandela's political heirs grow rich off corruption. Corruption has enriched ANC leaders and their business allies, black and white South Africans as well as foreigners. The statement is easily verified in the life and administration of former President Jacob Zuma, who had climbed into bed with the corrupt Indian Gupta family. The article admitted that Ramaphosa has amassed extreme wealth since the presidency of Nelson Mandela. The article admitted that Ramaphosa has amassed extraordinary wealth. I just said that. So, former President Zuma hopes to take the office back from Ramaphosa in this year's election to continue his pilfering of the people and of the country. It seems the seeds of corruption were in the transition from white minority rule to black majority rule under Nelson Mandela. When the transition took place, the blacks took political power in the national and local governments, but whites still held their economic power. Parliament has voted to take land from white farmers without compensation and give it to blacks. This is not exactly true. Blacks will never own the land. They may rent the land, but this will always be government-owned land if they manage to take this land. That bit of political thievery has turned the nation into a powder keg, as white farmers, including children and the elderly, have been tortured, raped, killed by roaming black thugs. And these thugs are incited to do these atrocities by government officials, by Malema, by the EFF, by Jacob Zuma, and by Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC's failure to act and stop this. So Ace Magashule, I think I'm saying that right, I hope so, is now the Secretary General of the ANC. But he was weaned on early corruption in the Free State province at the demise of Apartheid. He was in charge of economic development in the cabinet of Lakota, the premier of the Free State. Lakota said he caught Magashule stealing government money, which Magashule denied. The premier fired his underling, but the firing was overruled by the ANC Deputy Secretary General Jacob Zuma, who would become the president and take corruption to a shocking level. Zuma's been charged with other corruption accusations, including spending $24 million of public money to remodel his private home. The nation is in turmoil as Election Day approaches, with assassinations, unrest in the black population, and reports of coups in the works. Reuters reported on September 10, 2018, the ruling African National Congress on Sunday labeled reports that top ANC officials, including former President Jacob Zuma and the party's Secretary General, were plotting in secret to unseat Cyril Ramaphosa as party leader. As shameless gossip, however, photos have been published with the alleged plotters together at a local hotel. But were they conspiring to oust the president or playing dominoes? If one complains about the shoddy work done on a government project or publicly complains about political corruption, he ends up dead in a few days. Of course, the culpable politicians often attend his funeral and may even weep tears. President Ramaphosa pledged to clean out the massive mess from South Africa's stables he inherited from Jacob Zuma, but thus far it's only added to it. So, hitmen in power, South Africa's leaders are killing one another. This is an article written by the New York Times. And I'm going to go over a few things in it because it is dead on. It starts out, says their fear faded as they raced back home, the bottle of Johnny Walker getting lighter with each turn on the road. Soon, Magaqua? I don't know how to say that, was clapping and bouncing behind the wheel of his beloved V8 Mercedes-Benz, pulling into familiar territory just before dark. Minutes later, men closed in with assault rifles. He reached for the gun under his seat too late. One of his passengers saw flashes of light, dozens of them, from a spray of bullets pockmarking the doors. The ambush was exactly what he had feared. A few months before, a friend had been killed by a gunman in his front yard. Then another friend tried to open his front gate at night. A hitman crept out of the dark, shooting him dead. Next came Mr. Maraqua, struck half a dozen times. He hung on for weeks in a hospital before dying late that year. All the assassination targets had one thing in common. They were members of the ANC who had spoken out against corruption in the party that defined their lives. If you understand the Cosa Nostra, you don't only kill the person, but you also send a strong message. Another ANC whistleblower fearing for his life. He's now in hiding. We broke the rule of Omerta, he added, saying that the party of Nelson Mandela had become like the mafia. Political assassinations are rising sharply in South Africa, threatening the stability of hard-hit parts of the country. Unlike much of the political violence that upended the country in the 90s, the recent killings are not being driven by vicious battles between rival political parties. In most cases, ANC officials are killing one another, hiring professional hitmen to eliminate fellow party members in an all-or-nothing fight over money, turf, power. This is crazy. Corruption and divisions have flourished within the ANC in recent years. After nearly 25 years in power, party members have increasingly turned to fighting, not over competing visions for the nation, but over influential positions. The death toll is climbing quickly. About 90 politicians have been killed since the start of 2016. So this was in 2018, so I'm sure it's risen more since then. More than twice the annual rate in the 16 years before that, according to researchers at the University of Cape Town and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Crime. The murders have swelled into such a national crisis that the police began releasing data on the political killings for the first time in 2018. Ramaphosa is struggling to unite his fractious party before elections and has done little to stem the violence. His administration even resisted official demands to provide police protection for 2 ANC whistleblowers in the case surrounding Mr. Magaqua's murder, baffling some anti-corruption officials. Some victims were ANC officials who became targets after exposing or denouncing corruption within the party. Others fell in internal battles for lucrative posts in rural areas where the party has near total grip on the economy, jobs, and government contracts. The conflict is particularly intense, with officials constantly looking over their shoulders. Mr. Magaqua's province is the deadliest of all here. So the KwaZulu-Natal is his province. Here, 80 ANC officials were killed between 2011 and 2017. 80. Even relatively low-level ward councilors have bodyguards, and many politicians carry guns themselves. More than any other, the death of Mr. Magakwa, the most prominent politician assassinated so far, has focused attention on the deadly scramble within the party that helped bring democracy to South Africa. Democracy, my ass. Bullshit. After accusing party officials of pocketing millions in the failed refurbishment of a historical building, Mr. Magakwa and two of his allies were killed in rapid succession. Many others have suffered similar fates. Just this same month in Pretoria, the ANC councillor who had called for an inquiry into government housing was gunned down while driving her car, with her 3 children in the car. A few months earlier, a party official in a neighboring ward was shot dead near his home after exposing the shoddy quality of public housing. In Mpumalanga province, that's the province of Deputy President David Mabuza, who I've already spoken about and made a video about, and filed a complaint on with the South African government, the Zondo Commission, on a document that I have. An ANC city council speaker was gunned down in front of his son outside his home after exposing corruption in the construction of a soccer stadium. In the KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC councillor critical of corruption was shot dead last year while escorting a friend to her car. In March, an ANC municipal manager known to be tough on corruption was gunned down behind a police station by 2 hitmen. In the same month, in a rare arrest, an ANC councillor and the son of an ANC deputy mayor were charged in the killings of an ANC official who had led protests against corruption. But few other political figures have been arrested in such killings, adding to a widening sense of lawlessness. Yeah, you can say that again. The politicians have become like a political mafia, says Mary de Haas, an expert on political killings who taught at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. It's the very antithesis of democracy, exactly what I just said, because people fear to speak out. Yeah, because they die. So after Magakwa's death, Mr. Zulu, the whistleblower now in hiding, loudly condemned corruption. The impoverished municipal government spent a large chunk of its budget to refurbish a historic building called the Memorial Hall, but after 5 years and more than $2 million in public money, the project was a sinkhole of dubious spending with little to show for it. The Public Protector's Office urged the National Police to provide security for the whistleblowers and reprimand Mr. Ramaphosa's police minister for being grossly negligent in failing to do so, but the police minister rejected the report and moved to challenge it in court. The government's inaction reflects the ANC's inability or unwillingness to stop the internal warfare because it could expose the extent of corruption and criminality in its ranks, current and former party officials say. The allegiances go all the way to the top of the party, said prominent former ANC politician who works at ALTA, an organization fighting graft. That's why the ANC is not interested in this, no matter how many murders there are. The recent increase in killings inside the ANC is a potent reminder of how far the party has strayed from creating, in the ashes of apartheid, a political order based on the rule of law. That was apartheid. It was based on the rule of law. Many have told me that, the curfew, people were afraid to be out after the curfew. People were afraid to break the law because there were consequences. Now, there are no consequences. Politicians are above the law. No one is held responsible for these crimes. Only 8% of murders are even solved in the country at all. So, a pattern of kickbacks and corruption. When the ANC's Youth League was established, Mr. Magakwa became chairman, beginning his rapid rise within the league, traditionally a springboard to leadership in the ANC itself. But something nagged Mr. Zulu. Within a few years, the overriding pursuit of positions and money consumed his peers. Suddenly, some were taking kickbacks, drinking rare whiskey, and prodding Mr. Zulu to drop his high-mindedness, flipping Jesus teaching. They often ask him, who can live on principle alone? It's hard, but it can be done. Soon Mr. Zulu lost his government job and devoted himself to fighting corruption. But life was very different for his friend, Mr. Magakwa. Left the province for the national stage in Johannesburg. He became the ANC Youth League's National Secretary General, the number 3 position, in 2011. As soon as he was appointed, he went to a car dealership in a wealthy Johannesburg suburb where he bought an icon of South Africa's moneyed class, a Mercedes-Benz sport utility vehicle. He raved about it to his friends back home, its V8 engine, the thunderous noise, and the twin exhaust pipes. I don't know how he acquired his money, Mr. Zulu said. Remember, he had access to everyone and anyone who's big in the country. It only lasted a few months before Mr. Magakwa fell in one of the countless shakeups within the ANC and lost his position. Put most of his money into a minor league soccer team. When his team went on the road and it won a lot, he put up the players and coached in a hotel. But then his cash ran out. With his money gone, he went back to what he knew best, politics.